In this lesson, you will adjust an existing viewport to display a drawing at a particular scale on a layout. Then you will create a new viewport at a different scale and freeze chosen layers in one viewport. Open the Documentation 2 project file. It opens on Layout 1, and there's a viewport in the lower left-hand corner. Let's move this viewport into the title block area. The viewport can be treated just like a rectangle. Select the viewport rectangle and move it in. Turn off ortho if necessary and move it in to the lower left-hand corner of the title block space. Select it to activate its grips. Click this upper right grip and move it way up here to some arbitrary point. Deselect by pressing Escape, and then double-click inside the viewport to activate it. What you're looking at now is called Floating Model Space. This is the drawing area that is normally black on the Model tab. I can go ahead and pan and zoom to zoom into this drawing. Because I can do that, you might wonder, how am I going to scale this in relation to this sheet? And that is done down here with this pop-up menu. It's called Viewport Scale. Let's choose a scale of 1:1. Evidently, that's too large to fit on this particular sheet of paper. So let's choose a different scale. How about 1:2? That looks like it fits. So now I'll double-click outside the viewport to switch back into paper space. This is where I can actually select the viewport frame itself and manipulate it. In this case, I'll make it smaller so that it more closely borders the geometry of the drawing. I'll press Escape to deselect. Now if I go in here and double-click, I activate model space within this layout. I have to be very careful when I'm in this viewport because if I pan or zoom, I'll change the graphic scale down here. I want to make sure that the viewport scale says 1:2, and I want to make sure that I can see everything on the drawing. So I'll go back, double-click over here to switch back into paper space. I recommend that you lock your viewport after you've chosen a viewport scale for it and arranged it as we've already done here. To do that, select the viewport frame while you're in paper space, right-click, and choose Display Locked. Yes. Now let's look at the difference. If I double-click to go into model space and then try to pan or zoom, it doesn't let me do that within the viewport. It's panning and zooming all of paper space. That's the effect of locking a viewport. Double-click out here to go back into paper space, and then move the viewport over so that we have some room over here in this area of the title block for another viewport. Next, click the Layout tab. Click Rectangular here in the Layout Viewports panel and select Rectangular. Click 2 points as if you're just drawing a rectangle, but you're actually drawing another viewport. Double-click inside of it to go into model space, and then choose a different viewport scale for this viewport. Let's try 1:1. This will allow us to focus in on a detail of the drawing. I'll pan, and I accidentally rotated the mouse wheel there, and I changed the scale down here. I have to be very careful. I'll choose 1:1 again, and you can see it says 1:1 as long as I'm in that scale. Oop, it happened again. I'll switch to 1:1, and this time I'll double-click outside to go back into paper space. I'll zoom in a bit, select the viewport itself, and make it a bit wider. I want to focus in on this large gear. I'll bring the viewport frame in to crop all of the geometry around this circle. Okay, I'll press Escape to deselect. Double-click inside, and I'll just verify that indeed the scale is 1:1. And at this point, I should lock this viewport so that I don't accidentally mess up the scale. I'll go back into Paperspace by double-clicking, select the viewport, right-click, and say Display Locked, Yes. Now, in this particular viewport, I don't want to see these objects outside of the gears. I can hide those using the Viewport Freeze feature of Layers. Double-click inside this viewport, click on one of these objects here, and you can go to the Home tab to see which layer it's on. This is on the hatch layer. Okay, let's keep that in mind. Press Escape and select this circle. It's on layer 3. Okay, so let's freeze layer 3 and the hatch layer. Go over to the Layer Properties Manager. If you freeze the hatch layer, it freezes in all viewports, and that's not what we want, because I want to see it over here, but not over here. So instead of freezing the layer, what you do is you scroll over and you freeze it here in this column, Viewport Freeze. It only disappears in the selected viewport. This column would be used if you want to freeze the layer in the current viewport and all new viewports that you create in the future. I'll also freeze layer 3 in this particular viewport by clicking this icon. There we go. Now I'll double-click outside the viewport to return to Paperspace. Finally, let's turn off the viewport layer itself to hide these viewport frames. That will hide the viewport frame in Paperspace for both viewports. Now over here, this one doesn't look hidden. It's because this viewport was mistakenly drawn on the title block layer. I'll reassign that to the viewport layer, and it warns us that we've moved it to an off or frozen layer. Well, that was my intent, so I'll click Close. So now we have two drawings of the same information at different scales, and we've controlled which layers are visible by freezing selected layers in a particular viewport.